Hello and welcome back to my blog. On to part 24, The Creative Process in the Individual by T. Troward. Chapter 6, Ourselves in the Divine Offering, Part 1. There's 6 parts to Chapter 6, and then we're done with this and on to something else. If we have grasped the principle I have endeavored to state in the last chapter, we shall find that with this new standpoint, a new life and a new world begin to open out to us. This is because we are now living from a new recognition of ourselves and of God. Eternal truth, that which is the essential reality of being, is always the same. It has never altered. For whatever is capable of passing away and giving place to something else is not eternal, and therefore the real essence of our being, as proceeding from God and subsisting in Him, has always been the same. But this is the very fact which we have hitherto lost sight of, and since our perception of life is the measure of our individual consciousness of it, we have imposed upon ourselves a world of limitation, a world filled with the power of the negative, because we have viewed things from that standpoint. What takes place, therefore, when we realize the truth of our redemption is not a change in our essential relation to the parent spirit, the eternal Father, but an awakening to the perception of this eternal and absolutely perfect relation. We see that in reality it has never been otherwise, for the simple reason that in the very nature of being it could not be otherwise. And when we see this, we see also that what has hitherto been wrong has not been the working of the Father, but our conception of the existence of some other power, a power of negation, limitation, and destructiveness. The very opposite to all that the creative spirit, by the very fact of its creativeness, must be. That wonderful parable of the prodigal son shows us that he never ceased to be a son. It was not his father who sent him away from home, but his notion that he could do better on his own, and we all know what came of it. But when he returned to the father, he found that from the father's point of view, he had never been otherwise than a son, and that all the trouble he had gone through was not of the father, but was the result of his own failure to realize what the father and the home really were. Now, this is exactly the case with ourselves. When we wake up to the truth, we find that, so far as the Father is concerned, we have always been in Him and in His home. For we are made in His image and likeness, and are reflections of His own being. He says to us, "Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine." The self-contemplation of spirit is the creative power, creating an environment corresponding to the mode of consciousness contemplated. And therefore, in proportion as we contemplate ourselves as centers of individualization for the divine spirit, we find ourselves surrounded by a new environment reflecting the harmonious conditions which pre-exist in the thought of the spirit. This, then, is the sequence of cause and effect involved in the teaching of the Bible. Man is, in essence, a spiritual being, the reflection on the plane of individual personality of that which the all-originating spirit is in itself, and is thus in that reciprocal relation to the Spirit which is love. This is the first statement of His creation in Genesis. God saw all that He had made, and behold, it was very good, man included. Then the fall is the failure of the lower mentality to realize that God is love. In a word, that love is the only ultimate motive power it is possible to conceive, and that the creation of love cannot be otherwise than good and beautiful. Creations of love cannot be otherwise than good and beautiful. The lower mentality conceives an opposite quality of evil, and thus produces a motive power, the opposite of love, which is fear. And so fear is born into the world, giving rise to the whole brood of evil, anger, hatred, envy, lies, violence, and the like. And on the external plane, giving rise to discordant vibrations, which are the root of physical ill. If we analyze our motives, we shall find that they are always some mode, either of love or fear. And fear has its root in the recognition of some power other than perfect love, which is God, the one all-embracing good. Fear has a creative force, which invertedly mimics that of love, but the difference between them is that love is eternal and fear is not. Love, as the original creative motive, is the only logical conclusion we can come to as to why we ourselves or any other creation exists. Fear is illogical because to regard it as having any place in the original creative motive involves a contradiction in terms. By accepting the notion of a dual power, that of good and evil, the inverted creative working of fear is introduced with all its attendant train of evil things. This is the eating of the deadly tree which occasions the fall, and therefore the redemption which requires to be accomplished is a redemption from fear. Not merely from this or that particular fear, but from the very root of fear, which root is unbelief in the love of God. The refusal to believe that love alone is the creating power in all things, whether small beyond our recognition or great beyond our conception. Therefore, to bring about this redemption, there must be such a manifestation of the divine love to man as, when rightly apprehended, will leave no ground for fear. And when we see that the sacrifice of the cross was the self-offering of love made in order to provide this manifestation, then we see that all the links in the chain of cause and effect are complete, and that fear never had any place in the creative principle, whether as acting in the creation of a world or of a man. The root, therefore, of all the trouble of the world consists in the affirmation of negation, in using our creative power of thought invertedly, and thus giving substance to that which, as principle, has no existence. So long as this negative action of thought continues, so long will it produce its natural effect, whether in the individual or in the mass. The experience is perfectly real while it lasts. Its unreality consists in the fact that there was never any real need for it, and the more we grasp the truth of the all-embracingness of the one good, both as cause and as effect, on all planes, the more the experience of its opposite will cease to have any place in our lives. And that is the end of part 1 of chapter 11, Ourselves in the Divine Offering. Make it a great day, and bye for now.